This woman doesn't belong on this flight, Gate Agent Brenda Martinez muttered coldly as she struck a match. The flame moved toward Maxine Waters' passport. Brenda's heavy fingers held the burgundy booklet over a metal trash bin. Her eyes stayed fixed on Maxine's face, taking in every moment of her shock. Maxine's breath tightened. Around them, passengers quickly raised their phones to record. With a sharp sweep of her arm, Brenda knocked Maxine's boarding pass off the counter. It drifted down to the stained floor near Maxine's worn shoes. "Pick it up," Brenda said harshly. "On your knees." The flame touched the edge of the passport. The gold lettering began to blister and darken as thin smoke lifted into the air. "Stop recording," Brenda shouted toward the crowd. "This fake doesn't need an audience." Maxine's shoulder bag slipped down her arm. Her government ID case remained concealed inside. Have you ever been humiliated so deeply that someone tries to erase your identity in front of a crowd? The corner of the passport burst into a brighter flame. Brenda's smile stretched wider as she watched the federal seal turn to ash. "There," she said, dropping the burning document into the metal bin. Issue resolved. Maxine stood frozen as her identity disappeared. The burgundy cover curled inward, crackling as the heat warped her photo, the image melting beneath the plastic coating. "You just destroyed a federal document," Maxine said calmly. "I destroyed a forgery," Brenda replied, folding her arms with visible satisfaction. "That's how we deal with trash in first class." A teenage passenger, Sarah Carter, held up her phone, streaming live to more than 23,000 viewers. Messages flooded her screen. She actually burned it. "And call the FBI now." The digital boarding screen flashed. Flight 447, boarding in 38 minutes. Maxine's government-issued phone vibrated at her side. The caller ID read, "DC Director, urgent." She allowed it to ring unanswered. Smoke from the trash bin set off overhead sensors. A maintenance worker hurried over with a fire extinguisher, but Brenda waved him away. "Just disposing of documents. No danger here." Business traveler Marcus Webb streamed from the gate seating. His TikTok caption read, "Racist gate agent burns woman's passport at O'Hare." Within minutes, the phrase "passport burning" began trending online. Maxine bent down to retrieve her boarding pass from the floor. Dirt and shoe marks streaked across the paper. "Stay down there," Brenda ordered. "It looks more fitting." Passengers gasped. Several lifted their phones again, now recording with full focus on what was unfolding. Maxine Waters rose slowly, her boarding pass held steady in her hand. Her first-class ticket carried a discreet federal priority mark in the corner. Inside her messenger bag rested an FAA inspector badge, still out of sight. "Ma'am, I need to board this flight," Maxine said evenly. "Not with burned documents," Brenda replied, tapping the smoking remains of the passport with a pen. "Look at this mess. Cheap foreign printing always burns fast." The passport pages had separated, exposing entry stamps from dozens of countries. Official visas curled into ash. Years of verified international travel were now reduced to charred fragments. "I can verify my identity through the system," Maxine offered. "System's down," Brenda said smoothly. "And people with fake documents usually carry fake IDs too." "What's next?" "A counterfeit driver's license." Maxine's phone vibrated again. This time, the caller ID showed the federal marshal's office. Airport security officer Mike Torres arrived, drawn by the smoke and the gathering crowd. He glanced at the smoldering remains and immediately focused on Maxine. "What's the situation?" he asked Brenda. "Fraudulent documents properly disposed of," Brenda replied, gesturing toward the wastebasket. "This woman tried to board using obvious fake identification." Mike inspected the ashes. "Ma'am, did you bring false documents to this airport?" "Those were legitimate federal documents," Maxine answered. "Sure they were," Brenda scoffed. "That's why they burn so easily. Real passports don't go up like paper napkins." Passengers began choosing sides. A woman in pearls nodded in approval. "Good catch. These scammers are getting bold." Younger travelers, however, streamed the scene live with growing outrage. Sarah's viewer count climbed to 89,000, with comments demanding a federal investigation. Maxine's messenger bag shifted slightly, revealing part of a small chain attached to an official badge. She adjusted the strap carefully, keeping it hidden. Supervisor Janet Phillips arrived after passenger complaints about smoke. She surveyed the scene. Burned document remains, visible security presence, recording passengers, and Maxine standing composed amid the confusion. Brenda, what occurred here? Fraud attempt. Documents destroyed per protocol, Brenda said with pride. I protected our airline from criminal activity. Janet examined the ash-filled wastebasket. Parts of Maxine's passport photo were still visible, though severely burned. Ma'am, Janet said to Maxine with restrained disdain, attempting to board with fraudulent documents is a federal offense. You will be detained pending investigation. Maxine's phone rang again. The display read, FAA emergency line. I need to take this call, Maxine said. You need to cooperate with security, Janet replied. Criminals don't get phone access. The boarding display updated. Flight 447. Boarding in 32 minutes. Maxine watched as what remained of her federal identification continued to burn. The gold eagle emblem on the cover had fully melted. Her diplomatic immunity page was now indistinguishable from ash. More security officers arrived. The gate filled with uniforms, all operating under the assumption that Maxine was the suspect rather than the victim. Brenda absorbed the attention. It's always the quiet ones who run the biggest scams, she announced. Good thing I know how to spot fakes. Maxine's federal credentials remained concealed in her bag. Her first-class pass still showed priority status that Brenda had already dismissed as counterfeit. Her government-issued phone continued buzzing with urgent calls she was not permitted to answer. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, though smoke still drifted upward. Maxine's identity now existed only as what others believed to be evidence of a crime she did not commit. Gate manager Tom Rodriguez hurried over, guided by the sharp smell of smoke. He surveyed the scene, the wastebasket, the security officers, and the recording crowd. What exactly is burning at my gate? He demanded. Fraudulent documents, Janet replied efficiently. Brenda intercepted this passenger using fake identification. The evidence has been disposed of. Tom looked into the wastebasket. Maxine's passport image stared back from the ashes. Half the face melted away. The gold federal seal had pooled into metallic droplets at the bottom. Ma'am, he said to Maxine, bringing fake documents on a federal property is a serious offense. Maxine's phone vibrated again. The screen flashed Homeland Security, priority. She reached for it. Don't touch that phone, Mike ordered. Suspects don't make calls during an active investigation. Sarah's live stream had now surged to 247,000 viewers. Comments poured in faster than her screen could refresh. Document destruction is a federal crime. They're destroying evidence. The boarding display updated again. Flight 447. Boarding in 26 minutes. Additional officers formed a loose circle around Maxine. She remained seated, hands visible. Her bag strap shifted again, making the badge chain more noticeable. Look how calm she's acting, Brenda told the crowd. Classic criminal behavior. They think staying quiet makes their lies believable. Business traveler Marcus Webb switched from TikTok to Facebook Live, broadcasting to his professional network. This is unbelievable. An airport employee just burned a passenger's passport based on an assumption. Some passengers still supported Brenda. An elderly man nodded approvingly. Good. These fraudsters need to be stopped. Tom examined the burned remains more closely. Among the ashes, he spotted fragments of official seals and watermarks that appeared unusually detailed. These look too sophisticated for counterfeits, he muttered. Brenda's confidence flickered. High-quality fakes. That's how they fool people. Maxine's government phone rang again, this time with a distinct priority alert tone. Several passengers noticed. That's a government phone, said a woman in military fatigues. Those have special alert sounds. Criminals steal government phones too, Brenda countered quickly. Probably part of her scam. Flight attendant coordinator Lisa Park arrived with the flight crew. Captain James Morrison studied the situation carefully. We have smoke at the gate and security involvement, Morrison said. What caused this delay? Document fraud investigation, Tom replied. Passenger attempted to board with burned fake identification. Because they were obviously fake, Brenda insisted. Real documents don't burn like that. Maxine spoke calmly at last. Sir, all paper documents burn when exposed to flame. The material does not prevent combustion. Morrison studied her more closely. Her controlled, precise speech seemed unusually professional for someone accused of fraud. The boarding display updated again. Flight 447. Boarding in 22 minutes. Maxine's phone showed 17 missed federal calls. Her bag had shifted further, revealing more of the badge chain. The FAA inspector credential was nearly visible. "Ma'am, what's that badge in your bag?" asked Security Officer Jennifer Walsh. Maxine glanced down. "Personal identification. More fake IDs," Brenda declared triumphantly. "I'm sure she has a whole collection." Tom reached toward Maxine's bag. "We'll need to examine all identification. I prefer to handle my credentials myself," Maxine said quietly. "Criminals don't make requests," Janet snapped. "You gave up your rights when you brought fake documents onto federal property." The combined livestream audience had passed 400,000 viewers across platforms. Hashtags #passport burning and #airport racism dominated trending lists. Calls for a federal investigation and employee termination flooded social media. Captain Morrison's radio crackled. "Flight 447, this is Tower. We're showing an extended ground delay at your gate." "Roger, Tower. Document investigation still in progress." Maxine Waters watched more ash from her passport drift through the air vents. Her diplomatic visa page had broken into black flakes scattered across the gate floor. Years of verified international travel history were literally being blown away. "This is taking far too long," a first-class passenger complained. "Why don't you just remove her and start boarding?" "Federal protocol requires a full investigation," Tom explained. "Document fraud is a serious matter." Maxine's messenger bag had shifted completely now. The FAA inspector badge was clearly visible to anyone paying attention, but security and gate staff remained focused on her face instead of her credentials. Brenda poked at the ashes again with her pen. "Look how fully it burned. Cheap foreign material, probably made in someone's basement." Airport Police Officer Derek Carter arrived after reports of smoke and crowd buildup. He examined the burned remains with professional curiosity. "Ma'am, these appear consistent with legitimate documents," he told Maxine. "Federal passports burn differently due to built-in security features." Brenda stiffened. "I know fake documents when I see them. 15 years of experience." "Experience does not change chemistry," Maxine replied calmly. "All organic materials ignite at similar temperatures." Officer Carter studied her more carefully. Her technical language and controlled behavior under pressure did not match typical fraud cases. The boarding display updated. "Flight 447. Boarding in 18 minutes." Maxine's phone rang again with the distinct federal emergency tone. Several passengers recognized the sound. "That is definitely a government phone," said the military passenger. "I've heard those tones in federal facilities." "Stolen government property," Brenda insisted urgently. "Part of her operation." Maxine's bag had shifted enough that part of her FAA credential was now visible. The gold eagle emblem caught the overhead lights. Officer Carter noticed the reflection. "Ma'am, what kind of identification do you have in your bag?" he asked. Maxine looked directly at him. "Federal identification, officer." The words settled heavily in the air. Brenda's confident expression began to fade. Tom stepped closer to inspect the bag. Janet narrowed her eyes. Captain Morrison moved forward. "What type of federal identification?" Morrison asked. As hundreds of passengers recorded and over 500,000 viewers watched online, Maxine slowly reached into her messenger bag. With deliberate calm, she removed a leather credential holder and placed it on the counter beside the smoldering passport remains. The gold FAA Eagle emblem reflected under the lights. She opened the wallet slowly. Inside, her federal credentials were clearly visible. Maxine Waters, Chief Inspector, Federal Aviation Administration, Criminal Enforcement Division. Silence fell over Gate B12. Brenda's pen dropped to the floor. Color drained from her face as she reread the badge again and again, as if the words might change. That can't be possible," she whispered. Maxine placed her Department of Transportation Enforcement authorization beside the badge. The seal matched the one that had melted into metallic droplets in the trash bin. "Chief Inspector Maxine Waters," she said quietly. "FAA Criminal Investigation Unit. Badge number 4782. Federal Law Enforcement Authority under Title 49, USC Section 44701. Tom's hands shook as he examined the credentials. The holograms were authentic. The signatures were real. The listed enforcement powers were extensive. "You're a federal agent," he said in disbelief. "Chief Inspector," Maxine corrected. "And you just observed your employee destroy federal identification during an active, undercover investigation." Janet grabbed the credentials with trembling hands. searching desperately for a flaw. The DOT letterhead was genuine. The prosecutor liaison information was valid. Maxine's photo looked back from official government plastic. This must be fake too, Janet said weakly. Maxine activated her tablet. Would you like to verify my credentials through the Federal Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act database? My commission number is FA78292024. Officer Carter stepped forward immediately. Ma'am, I sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding. You followed protocol, officer, Maxine replied. Ms. Martinez did not. She committed multiple federal crimes on live broadcast witnessed by over 500,000 people. Brenda stared at the destroyed passport remains, at the federal seal she had melted, at the government property she had eliminated while the world watched. I didn't know, she stammered. It looked fake. The quality seemed wrong. Maxine removed her official notebook and began writing with precise control. Miss Martinez, employee badge 4471, deliberately destroyed federal identification at 7:23 a.m. Central Time. Physical evidence. Passport remains in metal waste basket. Witnesses, approximately 200 passengers. Livestream audiences exceeding 500,000 across multiple platforms. Captain Morrison examined the credentials with growing professional concern. Chief Inspector, how may we assist your investigation? You can begin by preserving all evidence, Maxine said, gesturing to the waste basket. That is now material evidence in a federal criminal case. Sarah's live stream climbed past 600,000 viewers. Comments poured in rapidly. She burned a federal agent's passport. Federal crime on live video. Maxine's phone rang again with the emergency tone. This time, she answered immediately. Water's here. Yes, the operation is proceeding as expected. Document destruction occurred as anticipated. Evidence confirmed from multiple digital sources. She paused, listening. Understood, Director. Federal response team en route. ETA 8 minutes. Tom's face turned pale. Maxine continued calmly. Approximately 200 on-site witnesses. Over 600,000 remote viewers. Full chain of custody established. 17 separate camera angles confirmed. Brenda sank into a nearby chair, staring at the ash-filled waste basket. It was supposed to be fake, she whispered. It looked suspicious. Legitimate federal documents look legitimate because they are legitimate, Maxine said firmly. There is no visible difference between my passport and any valid U.S. passport. Janet attempted to distance the airline from responsibility. Chief Inspector, this action was unauthorized. Individual employee misconduct only. Maxine knelt and carefully collected ash fragments into evidence bags. Under 18 U.S.C. Section 1361, authorized or unauthorized destruction is irrelevant. The crime has still occurred. She documented the scene with her tablet. High-resolution images of scattered ash, video of the melted federal seal, and screenshots of live recordings from every angle. Willful destruction of government property carries penalties of up to 10 years in federal prison and fines up to $250,000, Maxine announced. Brenda's confidence had fully collapsed. When destruction targets federal law enforcement identification during an active investigation, Maxine continued, maximum sentencing is recommended. Additional obstruction charges under 18 U.S.C. Section 1512 apply. Officer Carter asked quietly, "What investigation were you conducting here, Chief Inspector?" "Systematic discrimination within airline verification procedures," Maxine replied. "Specifically identity challenges based on appearance rather than legitimate security standards." The realization settled heavily across the gate. Brenda's biased assumptions had led her to destroy the very documents belonging to the federal inspector investigating that discrimination. Tom examined the credentials one last time, clinging to false hope. But the holographic seals were undeniable. Miss Martinez must be detained immediately pending federal charges, Maxine stated. Destruction of government property, obstruction of justice, interference with a federal investigation, and possible civil rights violations. Brenda looked down at the fragments scattered around her shoes. Federal evidence coated her uniform. Maxine's phone buzzed again. U.S. Marshal Service. ETA 6 minutes. Your federal arrest team is arriving shortly, Maxine informed her calmly. I advise full cooperation. Across social media, millions watched as the power dynamic fully reversed. The woman who had been publicly humiliated now stood revealed as one of the highest federal authorities in aviation enforcement. Maxine bent down and picked up a charred fragment of her passport photo. Half her image was burned away, but her federal credentials remained untouched and definitive. Federal marshals arrived in tactical gear. Deputy Marshal Rebecca Santos approached with formal respect. "Chief Inspector Waters, we're here to execute the federal arrest warrant." Maxine nodded toward Brenda. "Employee badge 4471. Charges as stated." Corporate Vice President Patricia Hawthorne hurried through the crowd, suit creased from emergency travel, attorneys close behind. "What is our legal exposure?" she demanded. Maxine displayed federal statutes on her tablet. Under 18 U.S.C. 1361, criminal penalties include up to 10 years imprisonment and $250,000 in fines. Corporate liability under vicarious responsibility could exceed $50 million. Patricia's face turned pale. "$50 million?" she repeated softly. "That is only the criminal exposure." Maxine Waters continued in a calm, steady tone. "Civil rights violations under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983 carry unlimited financial liability. Federal contract violations may also suspend your operating certificates at all 127 airports where your airline currently holds gate access." The airline's legal team typed rapidly on their tablets, calculating the scale of the financial damage. Senior counsel Marcus Webb leaned in and whispered urgently to Patricia, "Our annual revenue is $28.7 billion. A federal contract suspension would cost us approximately $847 million per month." Maxine displayed additional data on her screen. "Your airline processes 2.3 million passengers per month through O'Hare alone. Each discrimination incident carries potential damages ranging from $1.2 to $2 million under existing federal precedent." She looked up again. Miss Martinez's personnel file shows 17 prior complaints for discriminatory document challenges. Tom's hands shook as understanding settled in. We had complaints about her before. 17 documented complaints over 14 months. Maxine confirmed from her tablet. All involving passengers of color. All dismissed by management without investigation. This establishes a clear pattern of deliberate indifference to civil rights violations. Patricia seized the complaint file from Tom. Her legal team reviewed the records in growing alarm. Reports detailed Brenda's treatment of minority passengers, excessive document scrutiny, and discriminatory language. All logged, all ignored. "This creates corporate liability under Section 1983, lead counsel whispered. "Deliberate indifference to constitutional violations." Federal prosecutors arrived, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney David Kim. Maxine briefed him efficiently while Patricia and her lawyers watched in visible distress. "Complete video documentation from 19 different sources," Maxine reported. "Over 800,000 online viewers witnessed the federal crime in real time. Physical evidence is in federal custody. 17 prior discrimination complaints establish corporate knowledge." Prosecutor Kim examined the burned passport remains. "This is exceptionally strong evidence. A federal crime committed against a federal agent during a civil rights investigation, captured live on video, with documented prior corporate knowledge." Patricia attempted immediate damage control. "We are prepared to cooperate fully. Miss Martinez will be terminated at once. We will implement comprehensive anti-discrimination training." Maxine looked up from her files. "Ms. Hawthorne, termination does not affect federal criminal charges. Your employee committed felony destruction of government property. Criminal prosecution proceeds regardless of employment status." Federal marshals placed Brenda in restraints. Ash from Maxine's burned passport still covered her airline uniform. Physical evidence visible on her clothing. "I didn't know it was real," Brenda sobbed as the handcuffs locked. "It looked fake to me." "Ignorance of federal law is not a defense," Prosecutor Kim stated. "Federal crimes carry federal consequences regardless of intent." Maxine turned to Patricia with quiet authority. "Your airline now faces immediate federal enforcement action. A full operating certificate review begins Monday. All gate operations are subject to federal monitoring pending compliance review." Patricia's legal team calculated frantically. Federal monitoring costs averaged $2.3 million per month per major hub. A full review required 18 to 24 months. Our stock price has already dropped 12% since the live stream went viral, CFO Robert Martinez reported via emergency call. Market confidence is collapsing. Maxine displayed further regulatory data. Under Federal Aviation Regulation Part 129, operating privileges may be suspended immediately when employees commit federal crimes during passenger processing. Your authorization covers 847 daily flights across 17 states. The financial impact struck Patricia visibly. Daily revenue loss per suspended route, $2.8 million. Federal fines average $125,000 per incident. Legal defense costs are projected at a minimum of $15 million. Patricia asked in a strained voice, "What do you require from us to limit federal action?" Maxine's reply was direct and methodical. Immediate implementation of federal bias monitoring systems at all 127 gates. Estimated cost, $3.2 million. Mandatory federal discrimination training for 2,847 customer service employees. Annual cost, $1.8 million. A federal compliance officer reporting directly to the Department of Transportation. Salary and benefits, $350,000 annually. She continued reading from her enforcement authority. Real-time discrimination detection software at all gates. Implementation cost, $4.7 million. Monthly federal audit fees, $180,000. A victim compensation fund for affected passengers, $10 million minimum. The lawyers rapidly calculated the totals. First-year federal compliance costs exceeded $23 million. Federal criminal prosecution of Ms. Martinez proceeds independently, Maxine emphasized. These measures address civil rights violations and contract requirements only. They do not reduce criminal charges. Deputy Marshal Santos read Brenda her rights as cameras recorded. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say may be used against you in federal court. You have the right to a federal public defender. Maxine displayed the final enforcement notice. Ms. Hawthorne, your airline has 72 hours to submit a federal compliance plan to the Department of Transportation. Failure to comply triggers automatic operating certificate suspension under emergency authority. The boarding display still showed Flight 447 delayed pending federal investigation. Patricia recognized the full irony. Maxine's investigation had been triggered by precisely this type of discrimination, and Brenda's actions had produced definitive evidence of systemic failure. How long will federal monitoring last? Patricia asked weakly. Maxine closed her tablet. Until the Department of Transportation determines your airline demonstrates consistent compliance with federal anti-discrimination standards based on current violation patterns. Minimum federal oversight, 5 years. Federal crime scene investigators arrived to collect additional evidence. They photographed the burned passport remains, documented the melted federal seal in the wastebasket, and recorded formal statements from hundreds of witnesses. Maxine's phone showed 17 missed calls from national media. The story was rapidly spreading across every major news network. Prosecutor Kim asked, "Do you require medical evaluation for the criminal assault?" Maxine considered briefly. Document destruction impaired my ability to perform law enforcement duties. I will require formal documentation for the federal case record. Patricia recognized another legal reality. Assault on a federal officer carried additional penalties. Brenda's actions extended beyond property destruction. They constituted an attack on federal law enforcement authority. The corporate confrontation was complete. Maxine had documented every level of federal liability, individual criminal charges, corporate civil rights violations, and long-term regulatory consequences. The airline now faced years of federal oversight, massive compliance costs, and criminal prosecution with industry-wide impact. Maxine carefully collected the final fragments of her burned passport. The document destroyed in discrimination was now central evidence in a federal case that would reshape aviation civil rights enforcement. Justice would be measured not as retaliation, but as systematic change enforced by federal authority and corporate accountability. 3 months later, Federal Courthouse, Chicago Judge Margaret Carter delivered the sentence with formal authority. Ms. Martinez, you have pleaded guilty to federal destruction of government property under 18 U.S.C. Section 1361. The court sentences you to 36 months in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised probation. Brenda Martinez, now in prison clothing rather than an airline uniform, nodded in tears. The passport ashes that once clung to her clothing were now classified evidence. Your actions constituted a direct attack on federal law enforcement authority, Judge Carter continued. You destroyed the identification of a federal agent engaged in lawful civil rights enforcement. This court will not tolerate such conduct. Maxine sat in the gallery as the ruling was delivered. Her replacement passport rested inside her briefcase, identical to the one destroyed, but protected now by the full weight of federal law. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Prosecutor Kim. This conviction sends a clear message, he stated. Federal agents conducting civil rights investigations will not be targeted without consequence. Destruction of federal property leads to real federal penalties. Department of Transportation Headquarters, Washington, D.C. Secretary of Transportation Maria Rodriguez signed the Aviation Civil Rights Enhancement Act into law. Maxine stood beside her as cameras recorded the moment. This legislation mandates real-time discrimination monitoring at all commercial aviation facilities, Secretary Rodriguez announced. AI-powered systems will detect bias in customer service interactions and activate immediate federal oversight. The law required sweeping industry-wide reform. Every major airport was ordered to install advanced monitoring systems within 18 months. Federal bias detection algorithms would analyze gate interactions, flagging discriminatory language and behavior in real time. Maxine, who authored the technical specifications, addressed assembled aviation executives. The system monitors voice patterns, interaction duration, and behavioral indicators. It identifies statistical deviations consistent with discriminatory treatment. Airlines now faced clear choices under enforceable federal standards. Compliance with federal monitoring or the loss of operating certificates became mandatory. The burned passport incident ended the aviation industry's long-standing immunity from accountability. O'Hare International Airport, Gate B12, was fully renovated. Tom Rodriguez assumed a new role as Federal Compliance Director. His office now overlooked the same gate where Maxine Waters' passport had been burned. A permanent plaque at the site read, "Dedicated to equal treatment under law." The entire gate was restructured. Digital screens displayed real-time federal discrimination data. Customer service staff wore body cameras linked directly to Department of Transportation servers. Every interaction was recorded, analyzed, and rated for bias indicators. We now process 2,847 passenger interactions every day, Tom reported to the federal oversight team. AI monitoring has reduced discrimination complaints by 89% in 3 months. Bias training is now mandatory every month. Sarah Carter, the teenager whose live stream exposed the passport burning, became a federal student ambassador. She now trained young people on how to document and report discrimination. My video has been viewed 47 million times, she told a civil rights conference. It proves that ordinary bystanders can create accountability when systems fail. At Federal Aviation Administration headquarters, Maxine Waters' corner office displayed a framed image of her burned passport, a reminder that discrimination can target anyone, even federal officials. Her new title reflected expanded authority, Director, Aviation Civil Rights Enforcement Division. Her investigative team grew from 12 to 47 agents. Federal funding increased to $23 million annually, allowing systematic audits at major aviation facilities nationwide. We've documented 1,247 discrimination cases since the O'Hare incident, Maxine reported to Congress. Our actions have resulted in $127 million in federal fines and compliance investments. The burned passport became the catalyst for a full industry transformation. Airlines installed federal monitoring systems, bias training programs, and live reporting tools designed by Maxine's team. Patricia Hawthorne's airline became a model for compliance, not by choice, but by federal order. Discrimination incidents dropped to near zero under constant oversight. We invested $47 million in bias prevention technology, Patricia told shareholders. Federal monitoring costs $2.8 million per year, but our legal risk has been eliminated through full compliance. The aviation industry learned a costly lesson. One discriminatory act can destroy massive corporate value. Brenda's passport burning cost the industry hundreds of millions in compliance investments. but it also ended decades of unchecked discrimination. Maxine's team partnered with artificial intelligence firms to develop advanced bias detection systems. The technology analyzed thousands of variables in customer service interactions to identify hidden patterns. Gate agents now wore devices tracking voice stress, interaction time, and procedural consistency. The system flagged cases where minority passengers received different treatment with identical documents. This technology stops discrimination before damage is done, Maxine told international aviation officials. Real-time intervention corrects bias at the source. Airlines reported that customer satisfaction improved across all demographics once discrimination was removed. Legal scholar Professor Jennifer Walsh stated that the ruling confirmed discrimination against federal agents qualifies as obstruction of justice with enhanced penalties. The burned passport became landmark evidence strengthening civil rights enforcement across multiple industries. Maxine declined personal financial compensation and instead redirected funds to a $2.3 million federal civil rights education program supporting schools and communities. My passport was destroyed, but my authority remained untouched, she told a civil rights summit. When discrimination is documented and prosecuted correctly, it becomes a tool for system-wide reform. High school civics courses nationwide now study the O'Hare case. Maxine's calm professionalism under extreme discrimination became a national example of lawful response instead of emotional reaction. Federal data confirmed sweeping improvements across aviation. Discrimination complaints dropped 73% nationwide within 6 months. Airline processing times improved once discriminatory delays were removed. The Martinez conviction permanently changed aviation culture, noted Secretary of Transportation Rodriguez. Fear of federal prosecution ended practices that existed for decades. International attention followed. The European Union adopted similar bias monitoring laws. United Nations Human Rights Commissioner Dr. Amara Okafor stated, "The burned passport incident proves that single acts of discrimination can trigger historic reform." Maxine Waters' professional response became an international symbol of dignity under pressure. Present day, Maxine's office at the FAA. She held the framed fragment of her burned passport. Part of the image remained charred, but her eyes reflected calm determination. Her assistant knocked softly. "Director Waters, the aviation executives are here for the annual Bias Prevention Summit." Maxine placed the frame back on her desk. That destroyed document became the most powerful piece of civil rights evidence in aviation history. Brenda Martinez served 28 months in federal prison and was released under probation. She now teaches bias awareness workshops at a community center. Her conviction permanently bars her from transportation customer service work. "I destroyed more than a passport," she admitted to a restorative justice panel. "I destroyed my future." Maxine's method of evidence preservation, composure, and lawful authority is now standard federal training. The aviation industry invested $347 million in bias prevention systems across 892 airports. Federal monitoring now reviews 2.7 million daily passenger interactions. Transportation discrimination has dropped 84% since the incident. Sarah Carter now directs the National Student Documentation Network. "Maxine showed us that evidence changes systems," she told students. Maxine's investigative methods now apply to healthcare, banking, retail, and government services. The Department of Justice adopted her protocols as federal standard procedure. "Quiet authority delivers lasting results," Maxine told the International Civil Rights Conference. Her story proved that lawful power is stronger than prejudice. The attempt to humiliate her instead elevated her work worldwide and protected millions of future travelers. Discrimination still exists in transportation, retail, healthcare, and government offices. But Maxine's case proves that proper documentation creates accountability. If you witness discrimination, document safely. Record behavior, not emotions. Report to the Department of Transportation or Department of Justice. Support bias prevention programs in your community.